Lee, Catherine, us making it sort of official that we're going to target you know, existing tenants or local tenants.
I think you can add something into the use package about that. It's part of the dollar figure on that, but certainly some sort of language can be added into that. And happy to share the results from the visioning session that I think close to 400 people in the community participated in earlier this year about what they are interested in seeing in the neighborhood, as well as the market analysis that we just completed. I think there's a good synergy between the two. I can identify some of those.
We can also go back and check the language that was written into the 10 View PUD and see if something similar to that would work for us, or if we want to propose something different.
Okay, so do you want to, I'm thinking maybe you should move on to traffic, unless anybody has clarifying questions, and then we can talk about everything after they finish. Go ahead. Clarifying question.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify. You said that you've entered into a contract to purchase 4624 Wisconsin. So when did you enter that contract?
When did we enter that contract? I don't remember exactly. I think it was probably in May or June. Don't quote me on it. If it's really important, I can
Just
check.
clarify. Thank you.
Okay, so if you guys want to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
I guess that's
Is
actually.
this video? Are we being videoed?
Yep. Have you good site, bro?
Did you, yeah, give you a good side? Could you at least provide Nikki Turner?
It's a video camera disguised as a still camera.
Okay, so
Okay, go
now
ahead.
that we've got the lighting right, we've got the makeup right. As Brooke said, my name is Amelia Martin. I work for Wells and Associates, and we're the traffic consultant on the project. I'm just going to give you an update tonight on our traffic study. And just as some background, we go through a scoping process with the District Department of Transportation to get their sign-off on the methodology and what exactly our study covers. So we went through that scoping process early this summer, and we completed our traffic study in early November of this year. So some components of that study that I think are pertinent to everyone's concerns here include the site characteristics, so circulation, parking, and loading, and then also our proposed transportation demand management plan, which we've already discussed a little bit here. Then we also did a trip generation and subsequent traffic impact analysis, and then tonight I'll just close up with some conclusions. So first, in terms of site characteristics, we'll go over the circulation primarily for pedestrians. So just to orient everyone, north is on the right side of this slide here. And as you can see, the pedestrian entrances for both the retail and residential use are located off Wisconsin Avenue. And each one of the doors is indicated with a little yellow triangle. Okay? So that's pedestrian circulation. In terms of vehicular circulation, we are proposing to take access via the public alley, which is in alignment with DDOT's policies. So for those of you who don't know, DDOT has sort of this hierarchy of where you can take your access for your site. And their first choice, the first place they want you to take access is via a public alley. So if you have frontage along that alley and if you can provide access that way, that's how they want you to take it. So just so everybody can keep in mind the guidelines that we have to try and adhere to when we're designing the site. So as you can see here, the vehicular entrance both for residential and retail parking is indicated with this red triangle. And then we just had some discussion back and forth, is it 15 or 16 spaces for the retail use? That largely depends on where the gates are going to be. So on this actual floor, there are 16 spaces. But if we put a gate here for the retail use, so when people drive in, you know, you would park here. And if you're a resident, you would continue down this way. If we put the gate here, then it's only 15 spaces. If we put it here, then it's 16. So that's sort of where the discrepancy comes in. Some other things to note, we are keeping the existing service and delivery space shown in the purple box there. And then we're also going to be adding a loading berth so residents can move in and move out, and they have access to a 30-foot space.
So loading berth inside the garage?
I believe it's undercover. Is that right?
It's undercover. The car entrance is indicated here. Retail parking goes this way. Residential parking would go down and around and underneath.
And then the loading
The
berth?
loading berth is over here, so it's a separate entrance.
But it's cover on all sides?
It's covered and it can have a door that closes.
Right, okay, so just for noise, okay.
So that's vehicular circulation. All right. And then here we have just a table summarizing the proposed parking. So on the left, you see what is required by code under the new zoning regulations. And on the right is what we're proposing. So just one note I'll make on the required parking. Under the new zoning regulations, not only does it stipulate how many spaces you need by use, but if you're in close proximity to transit, they have you take a 50% reduction in your parking requirements. So in this case, because we're so close to the metro, our requirement is actually only 28 spaces. But as we've already discussed, we're providing the existing 74, so not only are we exceeding the actual minimum, but even if we weren't taking that required reduction, we'd still be exceeding what's required by code. And then in terms of loading, same deal here, required on the left, proposed on the right. Again, I'll just kind of explain to you the new zoning regulations. So the new zoning regulations allow you to assume that if you have multiple uses on one site, they can share their loading facilities. So what that essentially means when you're doing your building design is you take the use that has the highest requirement, which in this case would be the residential. So I already sort of pointed out the locations of those, but that's required and proposed loading. All right, so next I'll talk about transportation demand management. And the first thing we do when we're thinking about how can we get people to not drive to the site is we look at the area we're in. And luckily, we have a lot of transportation facilities already surrounding us. We have the metro stop to our south. We also have 8 different bus routes that serve the site. In addition, we have 2 capital bike share stations providing a total of 40 bikes, and then 7 car share vehicles between Enterprise and Zipcar. So there are a lot of multimodal options surrounding the site and a lot of opportunities for us to capitalize on that when we're creating our TDM plan. So what are some components of that plan? Largely, the first 3 bullets deal with making sure that information I just showed you gets disseminated to people living on the site or people coming to visit the site. A transportation management coordinator largely works with the residential use and disseminates that information to people who are now moving into the building. We provide that information on the management website, and then a transit screen shows real-time travel information for both transit and driving. So you can see, oh my gosh, Rock Creek is a mess right now. I'll take the bus because it's coming in 3 minutes. So that's the kind of information that provides. In addition, Brooke already mentioned that we're providing covered bicycle parking inside for residents primarily, and that is in excess of what we're required to provide to really encourage biking to the site. And then finally, we had the little discussion about RPP.
So,
Yes.
oftentimes cyclists are, well, almost always second-class citizens, but in this case, is the entrance through where the cars come in? Is it as convenient as if you're driving?
Yeah, so I believe access to the bike parking is via the.
It's very easy to get from the bicycle parking room out to the alley. We can flip back to the plan, or I can forward it to you separately. Peter, right?
There's a curb cut or something where the people can use, that's all I'm asking.
I'm gonna send you the plan
Yeah.
that shows how people
You
get
gotta
around.
wait for the gate to go up, which oftentimes people forget to do, like the Whole Foods right over here, where you can't actually ride your bike into the parking lot. As long as you plan for it, bike is good.
Point taken.
Okay.
We got that.
Any other questions on?
Well, before we just so we can have you move along, are these clarifying questions about what they've presented? Because otherwise we'll have time at the end.
Well, however you want to proceed, I have some questions.
So I'm thinking maybe you should let her get through it unless you want, there's something you don't understand about what they're proposing.
No, I understand what they're proposing, I have some
Okay, there will be time.
Is there a
I'll
chance
finish
that the
up.
questions will get answered through the rest of the presentation? Maybe?
Yeah, let's,
I can
Yeah.
wait.
I'm just saying, you know, because other people, let's let them push through and then we'll have questions.
Fair enough.
Sure, that works.
About how much longer do you need?
I'm close,
Okay.
yeah, just this last section here. So then what we look at is trip generation. Primarily what we use is the size of the development. You can see here, these numbers are what is occupied, and we use these numbers when we do our analysis. In the future, we assume the proposed redevelopment will be fully occupied. So that's kind of what you see here. Again, this is scoped with DDOT and they sign off on our assumptions. We use the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation equations to arrive at these numbers, and this includes taking into account a reduction for the urban setting that we're in. And so what you see here in our net trips is we're actually expecting to reduce the amount of traffic with the proposed development program because we no longer have an office use on the site, and our retail is essentially about the same.
Does that mean what in and out, I mean cars going in and out of the garage?
Right, yeah, so trip generation looks at trips coming in and trips coming out. People often like to think of it in terms of number of cars. It's not entirely accurate. It's like you draw an imaginary line, and in is one number and out is the other.
Unless the car parks overnight, it's 2 trips.
Right, exactly. And so this takes into account the total going in and out of the site. Okay? Traditionally, with that in mind, the totals we have there, normally we wouldn't have to do a traffic impact analysis with DDOT, but they asked us to prepare one anyway. And if you look at the study area, it's actually pretty comprehensive. We do 2 intersections on Wisconsin Avenue. We looked at 3 on 42nd Street, and then also included this 3rd leg of the triangle there at Brandywine and River Road. And as you can imagine, because we project we're actually reducing traffic levels, when we ran our analysis, we saw that we wouldn't have any level of service or queuing impacts as a result of the proposed development. So then just in conclusion, again, we're providing access in accordance with DDOT policies. We're going to be exceeding the minimum for our vehicular parking requirements, as well as meeting code for loading. We're in a very, transportation-oriented area, and we are also expecting to see a reduction in traffic, 12 to 19% fewer trips during the peak hours. And as a result, we expect there won't be any adverse impact as a result of the project. Okay?
Okay, thanks. Okay, now we'll take questions. I see a hand up here, and I know you've got a bunch, so let me take them.
So, I want to make a comment first, a couple of them. First of all, the fact that we've got the spaces that are in excess of what's required and is going to generate more trips through the alley than it would if you guys actually went lower as you could. But, the garage is there already, so those are complaining about trips through the alley and having more parking, that's going to help generate more trips. So that's one thing I want to point out. The second thing is that, and I get so bored about this discussion about RPPs, because within about a quarter mile of this, can you go back to the diagram that you got there with the building on it? And I arrived this on Belt Road with the map, if you would. Yeah, right there. So if you see, everybody sees where the Belt Road sign is there. There's free parking on that spot for 40 cars. It's not signed, it's not residential. If I'm going to move into this property and I'm hell-bent on having a car, I'm going to leave my car there because the National Park Service is in charge of ticketing there. I ride my bike there every day. It's used as commuters and the like. So when the inevitable complaints that are going to happen about traffic generation and parking RPP, you ANC got to understand that they're going to go to the path of least resistance, which is free. So, the debate about RPPs, I think, is fairly specious. So I had a question, though, about, it seems to me that this location is one where you don't actually get a lot of cars parking on the street under current circumstances. it seems to be pretty free and clear. When I ride my bike up there, there's one or two on the side, even on the other side of the street. So I didn't see you, though, take that into account as far as trip generation goes. It looks to me, and I'm not a traffic engineer, there's lots of spaces to park within a couple of 100 feet of the front door of this place. So I don't know how that fits into the traffic management. So that's sort of my question.
So is your question more in terms of what does that do to the trip generation, or?
And the capacity that's there for existing parking. My suspicion is people don't like going in garages to park. They're going to park on the street. And so I just want to know how that factors into
Sure.
this whole traffic management.
Sure, so in terms of trip generation, because we base it on square footage of the use, that sort of takes into account not just people who would want to park in the garage, because if we did it by number of parking spaces provided, then you would have a good point that our numbers are skewed. But because we do the analysis based on the square footage, that takes into account the total draw of the site, which includes parking on street and parking in the actual garage.
But did you really look at how much parking is being used on the street under current circumstances?
No, so we didn't do existing, we call that existing parking occupancy counts on street. Yes, we like to use the fancy words for it.
There's probably an acronym.
Yeah, we didn't do that largely because when we scoped the project with DDOT, that's something they ask for when you're seeking relief from the parking requirements. Since we're not seeking relief here, I see your point. Some people may elect to park on street. You never know. I personally prefer not to do that in the city. Some people braver than me may choose to do that. But because we're not seeking relief and we're not essentially like encouraging people to park on street, we didn't end up doing that analysis.
Did you assume that more than what, 50, there's 58 spots for the residences, right? That's what I think the number was. Did you assume that there would be only 58 spots used, or that there would be actually more than 58 cars would be generating those trips?
Again, so we did it based on number of dwelling units. So that sort of takes into it, but we also do look at parking supply. So to your point, when we run our calculations and we're figuring out what's an appropriate reduction to take for non-auto modes in the area, we sort of do a back calculation and say, okay, does this number make sense with the number of parking spaces
And
provided?
what was the number you used to plug in?
To plug into our equations,
Yeah,
or?
as far as the number of cars, yes. Yeah.
So to calculate the trips, we use the number of dwelling units, 136.
Yes.
And then to back calculate, we assume the 58 for the residential use.
So the trip generation was based on 138.
136 apartments.
Dwelling units.
Because
Yeah,
what he's asking is, how many cars do you assume in generate, will be in the building, is that fair?
Yeah.
Based on, is it gonna be more or less or the same as 50?
I don't see, I guess I don't know
What
the
he's,
answer to
what,
that.
what they're trying to get at
Uh-huh.
is, you will have tenants in the building who will want to have a car,
Mhm.
but they'll only drive on the weekends. And they may park on Belt Road, as he said.
I see,
Or they may
okay.
rent a parking space. When you calculate trips, you may find that there are only, what, your number was 62 trips a day or something like that, in and out. But there still might be 60 cars. Tenants in the building may own 60 or 70 cars, they just will use them once a week. I think that's kind of what isn't that what you're asking?
Or they'll use them during the day and park, you know.
Well, but the idea is the trip generation.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm gonna.
Your formula, excuse me, your formula, which I understand is based on industry calculations, and you take so many apartments and you put it in the blender and it comes out with this number. But when you do have these other modes of transportation available, it is possible, certainly people my age would have a car that they would use occasionally just for the convenience. And I think some of the people in here are questioning whether this analysis does not account for people parking a car and leaving it. No, you're not? You're not
So what you guys are getting to is how many people actually own a vehicle and put it in there. I don't know that number off the top of my head. Largely, that's more an issue of the market and who will actually be living here. I will say, just in my experience, because these are proposed to be apartments, the number of people who own a vehicle is much lower. But not to put you on the spot here, generally we kind of say that's more of a question to the developer in terms of what their market research says and how much parking they think they need for who's going to be using this.
Are we talking about people that own a car and leave it in the garage and don't use it that much? Because they're walking and they're biking and riding Metro, so they're leaving the car in the garage all the time?
Well, I think the community would be concerned about people somehow skirting the rules. They wouldn't have a permit, but they'd figure out some place to park where it would deprive, we might say it's fine if it deprives Maryland commuters from free parking, but it may deprive people who've lived here for 20 years of parking for their guests, if they're having people over during the day or whatever. I think that's the concern that's being
But
raised.
two things. One, the trip generation is based on, the estimates are all based on the total number of units in the building. It's not based on the number of parking spaces. So it accounts for, this is your question, it accounts for people who come to the site but don't park in the garage and park on the street. The numbers assume just a trip generation based on the number of units.
I understand that.
And then the second piece of it is, that's where the fact that the residents can't get an RPP sticker comes into play, so that they can't go and just park on the street, other than Belt Road, which apparently has some unsigned streets. But otherwise, they're either at the mercy of metered parking and trying to, feed the meter, or they'll park in the garage, or they won't own a car.
I just said, that the RPP restrictions, assuming they work, protect people who have RPP signed streets. So, for instance, if you find people parking on your street and it's not RPP, then you might want to petition
Yeah,
for the
petition
RPP.
to get it.
The fact that Steve brought up that there are a handful of places, which he's now announced, so you guys should all take advantage. I mean, so there's a little bit of free parking, but that's, that's right. Maryland commuters could use it. People who have no restrictions could use it. So what, though? I mean, we can only protect against, what we can protect against. We can't protect, and I don't think any of us really care that much if the car parked on Belt Road is from Maryland commuters in one of these buildings as opposed to a Maryland commuter? No. Anyway, I hear what you're saying, but I just don't.
I guess the problem, the way I see it, is that you could have, if every resident, and let's say if every apartment had a car, that would be 136 cars. 54 of them would be parked in the garage, possibly, but now you've got more cars on the street out there. So there's more traffic potentially on the local streets. The in and out, I agree with your in and out analysis. Maybe that may be right, but there may be more cars still on the neighborhood streets in Wisconsin, for example.
Okay, so actually, let me just add, guys, just because there's limits to what we can do, we usually don't have side colloquies, and I guess I would say if you could raise your hand. So, have you finished your remarks? Okay. Anybody else?
Can I just ask
Yeah.
a question here in terms of how the property is gonna work for parking? If you have 136 units, I'm assuming that you're probably gonna charge the residents an additional fee to park their car.
Yes.
So you, as a resident, will not be able to park your car in the building unless you have paid the additional fee. So if
Correct.
one of the 136 minus 54 people who does not have paid parking in the building parks their car there, it will get towed.
Yes.
So that is a significant incentive for these people not to have cars if they're going to bother to rent the building, right?
There will be a gate, and if you're paying for parking, you'll have a fob, and that will allow you to get into the garage. If you're not paying for parking, you won't have access to bring a car into the garage. I think people that have a car that are looking for an apartment, a question they're gonna ask when they're speaking to the leasing agent is, do you have parking available? If our garage is full, someone with a car is gonna go rent an apartment at a building that has parking available.
I mean, especially if they've got the RPP restrictions. Well, why do I want to deal with this?
Just like if they have a pet and they go to a building that doesn't allow pets, they're gonna go find a building that allows pets. It's Dave's favorite metaphor.
Right, you guys allow pets?
Yes.
Excellent.
All right. So I'll get you, and then there were a bunch of other hands, but okay. I'll get you, Dennis, afterwards.
Is or is the rent and the parking space, are they unbundled?
Unbundled.
For folks, and that just means they're separate, right? And that's-
Parking is not included in the rent, it's an extra, it's an add-on.
DDOT would make us do that if we weren't otherwise.
Yeah, I know,
doing
it's
it.
basically, you'd need an exemption, right? So I'm gonna get you, and then you.
I want you to go, I have a series of questions.
Oh, all right, so go ahead.
In providing an overview of the development, you skipped what I believe is the defining characteristic, which is the height of the property, proposed height of the property. Now, I'm sure you would say, oh, it faces Wisconsin, true. But it also backs up to a long-established residential community. I think you have adjusted your setbacks to provide some relief to the neighbors, but it's too much. You're pushing the envelope too far.
Do you have a question?
That's a statement.
A comment, rather than.
A comment, excuse me.
Okay, so are you set now? You got a bunch? Okay, well, actually, do we want to like sort of let you, and did you want to?
Yeah, I'm here on behalf of Revive 3, whenever you think it's
Well,
right for
it's,
us to make a statement.
it's fine, and then if you want, maybe you can say if you could go after that, and then we'll take others. Does that work for you, or?
No, I think
Dennis,
I'd like to go
you wanna go
now.
last.
All right, so you go
Dennis wants
first.
to go last.
So, all right, we've had a bunch of hands, so
He's got a question.
There's another guy.
is it a short?
Short,
Okay, because these guys have their
real short. And actually, I just want to echo what this a woman back there said. And my concern is actually the height. I know we're talking about parking right now and traffic, but it's the height of the building, which is what is a huge concern for me. And I think you expressed it well. And it was in the Northwest Current today, Dennis Williams's viewpoint, which I think laid it out very well. And that's
Colossus.
that's it.
Okay, so then Dennis will let you go, and then we'll let you go, and then we'll see how much time we have. Try to take some others.
We can start with this. I think my first question really has to do with the scope of the study you're doing. As you pointed out, the main entrance and exit from the building is that alley. And yet, so on Chesapeake Street is one side of that exit and entrance road alley. But you only cover the intersections at Wisconsin and 42nd. You don't carry your analysis out to River Road. But the trucks and cars and things that are going to come into this area to go to your building many of them are going to be coming from River Road, and you've not included that in your analysis.
So,
Wouldn't it be,
so you're
wouldn't it be
concerned
more
about,
appropriate to expand to include that?
so you're concerned about this one right
Yes.
here?
Mhm.
So I can say we have the benefit of retrospect in this project, and that's largely because we already know with the study area we have, the closer you get into your site, the more likely you're to have an impact. The further you go out from your site, the less likely you're to have an impact because your traffic gets dispersed amongst these. So for example, here, we have
So you made
traffic
a-
coming from
So let's, you
42nd.
don't need to give me a long explanation. If you made an assumption that it's irrelevant, I don't accept that, but that's your answer, that's your answer. The other.
Well, to be clear, the engineer made that assumption, but the District Department of Transportation agreed with it.
Okay.
Do you have,
The experts may be.
well, I'm sorry, I do have a quick clarifying question. Do you have a final approval on the study, or
I
just
haven't
permission?
gotten comments back from Ryan Westrom
Okay,
at
so-
DOT yet.
Okay, so because we may, as well as some of the constituents have an opinion as to whether or not you should look at some other intersections, which we'll share, and either not, or either take or not, but it sounds like that is still an open question.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
clarify? No, in terms of CTR, where is this in the CTR? Like, when will we see that?
So this analysis
Yeah, like.
is in this, it's